Hello and welcome. If you are tuning into this video, it is likely because you are from another culture and you have not experienced an American style wedding before. Or even better, you are attending mine and Monish's American wedding next year in the spring of 2025. So if that is the case, let's go ahead and dive on into what you can expect when attending an American wedding. It's vastly different from other cultures such as Indian culture or Vietnamese culture. It is its own thing. And I do want to point out that just like within Indian culture and other cultures around the world, American weddings will differ from wedding to wedding. So how we do our wedding might be a lot different from another wedding that you attend. Although you will find a lot of similarities, maybe things are just mixed up differently or put in different orders, or they leave some things out and add something else. That's just what it is these days. It's all about just kind of doing what works best for the couple. So that said, I'm going to go over a lot of the traditional things that do occur in pretty much all weddings, as well as some non-traditional things that you can expect when attending our wedding personally, or that you might see in other weddings that you are looking to attend in the future. So let's go ahead and dive in. And I'm going to start by making it clear that an American wedding is a one-day event. And by one day, it's typically usually only about 6 hours in total. So, for example, our wedding is only going to be 6 hours. That's all we have the venue for. So that is typical. It's usually either going to be an afternoon and evening type thing. Sometimes they do them during the day. I don't think I've ever attended a daytime wedding, but I know things have changed a lot since COVID, so don't hold me to that. But ours, for example, will definitely be in the evening. So upon arriving to the venue, at our wedding specifically, all of our guests are going to be directed into a room where they will sign the guest book and you will mingle with other guests. So this is usually how things begin at an American wedding. There's always some type of guest book. Now, ours is not going to be a traditional guest book. A traditional guest book is literally just a book with paper that people write their name and say something nice to the couple, or like say their name and that they were here. So I think that is completely outdated and a waste, because that's going to sit on a shelf and ain't nobody going to touch that. So we're going to have a lot more creative type guest books at our wedding, and so be on the lookout for that. It's going to be really fun and exciting. But we just want you guys to just sign your name so that we can remember that you were there, on the off chance that we don't get any photos with you. So that's the main reason for guest books. To be honest, I think this actually stemmed from back before photography was around. That's what I'm going to assume. So that said, when you are attending an American wedding, it is super, super, super important to arrive on time, because once the ceremony begins, you cannot enter it without interrupting it, and that can be very problematic for the bride and groom. Now, another thing I want to note, which I think is really important to point out, is that in American culture, the wedding is about the bride and the groom. They are the main focus. They are the stars of the show. It is about them. I know other cultures, like specifically Indian culture, for example, the wedding is about the families. That is a lot different than how we do it here in the U.S. And so while families are involved and they are a big part of the wedding, they are not nearly as involved as they are in, say, Indian weddings, for example. So all of that said, before the wedding officially begins, like the ceremony part, I should say, all of the guests will then be ushered in to take their seats. Now, how this works is that it's just rows and rows and rows of chairs. And up at the front, there's either an altar, if it's like in a church, or for us, we're not having our wedding at a church, it's all at a venue. So there's going to be a wedding arch is what it's called. And that's where we will stand and the whole ceremony will take place. So traditionally, you have the bride side and the groom side, and everybody who's there for the bride goes and sits on that side, which is usually the left, because the bride will stand on the left. Or if you're with the groom side, you sit on the right and sit with all the groom's like family and friends. That again has kind of been outdated, and nowadays most people will have a sign and it says pick a side, like we don't have a preference, because in my opinion, that just brings divide, and nobody wants that. We're all coming together to celebrate the bride and the groom. We don't need to be divided between the two. So specifically for us, there will be no dividing of anything. It's just everybody all together. So once everybody is officially seated, which again, this is why it's important to be on time, because once everybody is seated and the show starts, you will not be able to enter into the area where this is happening. You'll have to just wait until it's over. So the processional will begin. And a processional is when the groom, he's going to walk down the aisle, which is between all of the, rows and rows of chairs. And he's going to go up to the wedding arch at the front where the officiant will already be standing. After he walks through, it's going to be his groomsmen one by one coming through. All of my bride tribe, or if, you only have women, it's called a bridesmaid, bridal party. The bridal party comes through. And then we have the flower girl and the ring bearer. And all of these people walk down the aisle and they take their places at the front. The flower girl is literally what it sounds like. It's a girl who has a bunch of flowers and flower petals specifically. And traditionally it's a young girl. It's usually like a niece of the bride or something like that. And she walks down the aisle and tosses flower petals. So ours is going to be a lot different. And I'm not going to say specifically what it is because I want it to be a surprise. But nowadays, people will have adults do it. They'll have siblings do it. It kind of just depends. But that's still typically part of the procession. And the ring bearer is usually like a nephew or, a brother or whatever, the son of the groom or the bride. And he comes through and he carries the rings because these rings are a super important part of the ceremony, which I'll get to in just a moment. But once all of these people have made it down the aisle, it's always to music. It's usually kind of slow music, but we'll see for ours. Once everybody's made it down and you're at the end, now it's time for the bride to enter. So at that point, there's a specific song that usually plays that kind of, signifies, oh my God, here comes the bride. Literally, I think the song is called Here Comes the Bride. That's the traditional thing to play. And either the officiant usually will say, like, let's all be standing as the bride makes her entrance, something like that. And then boom, here comes the bride. Now, she's going to walk down the aisle by herself with her dad, typically. So I say it like that because I am not walking down the aisle with my dad. That is a very traditional way to do it, and that's just not how we're going to do it. So somebody else will be walking me down the aisle, so don't be surprised. But it's like the grand entrance, like, oh my God, the bride is here, now we can get started. Because in actuality, I say that the American wedding's about the bride and groom. It's more about the bride and also about the groom. There's a little bit of outweigh in that, but it is what it is. So once she walks down the aisle, she makes it to the end, and then the ceremony officially begins. So it's going to usually start with the officiant saying some things like welcoming all the guests, thanking them for attending, and then depending on who the officiant is to the bride and groom, they will sometimes share a brief history of the couple or just some nice thoughts and reflections on marriage itself. So that, again, that just varies. Sometimes the bride and groom pick exactly what is said. Sometimes they let the officiant decide. It just depends wedding to wedding. So it's also common at the beginning for the bride and groom to select readings for the ceremony. And these would be things that like biblical passages or some other kind of religious aspect that they want to be read out loud before they begin. So again, Moni and I, we are not religious, so we won't be having any of this. But if you attend a different type of wedding in the future and it's maybe in a church or it's just from some very religious, couple, then you might hear these. So don't be surprised if that occurs in the future. And so from there, the officiant will address the couple directly, and this is known as the officiant address. So at that point, the couple will then we'll learn about our responsibilities and the weight of marriage. And this is where you'll likely hear the things like for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, like all those things. You might have heard that in some, Hollywood movies about marriage or whatever. So that's where this comes into play. And then from there is the vow exchange. So, exchanging of vows is an important tradition in American weddings, and many couples often choose to craft their own vows to communicate their love and devotion for their partner in a way that's unique to the couple themselves, while other people just choose pre written vows. So, you know, Moni and I are going to handle that the way we're going to handle it. Y'all will see. But nowadays, a lot of people also, they'll choose to exchange the vows in private before the ceremony actually begins. So this is just dependent on the couple. Some people, especially if they write them themselves, maybe it's something private and they don't want to speak this in front of an audience of 150 people. They want to just hold it to themselves. And that's okay. So Moni and I will exchange vows publicly, but you might attend a wedding in the future where nobody exchanges them, and hey, that's okay. We all get to choose what we want to do. It's build your own wedding. Now, after this is when the rings come into play. So, rings have always been a symbolization of marriage here in the U.S. So, during the proposal stage, that's when the bride, she gets her ring. She gets one ring. Obviously, I've got one ring. And this is the engagement ring to start with. And then that is to kind of symbolize, okay, like we have started the process. We are going to get married. I am taken. Everybody leave me alone. So, at the wedding, what is exchanged is there will be a wedding ring, obviously, for me to give the groom. He'll finally get his. And then I will get a wedding band. So that's going to be exchanged. So I will be putting a wedding ring on Moni's left wedding ring finger. This is a ring finger. On his left hand ring finger. And he'll be putting the band onto my hand to complete my ring set here. So that is typically what's going to happen next. And then from there, after exchanging the rings, is when you'll hear the officiant usually say the announcement of, "You may now kiss the bride," which symbolizes our union in marriage. So boom, we are now officially married. So the entire ceremony will take about 20 to 30 minutes maximum, and it's going to conclude with the officiant saying, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." That's typically the final bit. Oh, that's actually said before "you may now kiss the bride." It's the "I now pronounce you husband and wife, you may now kiss the bride." That's typically how everything wraps up. So at this point, all of the guests, they're going to stand up, but they're going to stay in their seats because the bride and the groom, they're going to walk down the aisle together and they're going to make an exit. So at this point, there's usually cheering, clapping, hooray, everybody's super excited. So in that excitement, just remember to stay in your seats until the entire wedding party from the front of the wedding arch until they are gone. Because after the bride and groom exit, then the bridal parties, they come together and they exit too. And after they officially exit, now the ceremony is done. 20, 30 minutes later, we're over. I will say I have attended some weddings where the ceremony lasted 10 minutes. So don't be surprised if you sit through a 10-minute ceremony in the future. That is quite possible. So as soon as the ceremony has concluded, everybody has made their exits, and we're all finished up, the bride and the groom are going to be ushered away with the photographers to go get their couples' photos. And during these couples' photos, the wedding party is also usually involved. So, all the groomsmen and my bride tribe, we're all going to go together. And also usually close family members. So, like the parents of the groom. My parents won't be present, and so just anybody who I think I want to deem important who's going to come along and take photos, family photos. We're going to take couple photos, like solo, just me and him, that type of thing. So while we're off on the side doing that, this is where things can get a little bit different depending on how weddings are set up. So, for example, in our wedding specifically, our reception is also at the venue where the ceremony is. So, all of you, our guests, you guys are going to be ushered from the little area where the ceremony took place over to the lawn on the left-hand side where there's going to be cocktail hour. So, you guys can enjoy some beverages and just kind of hang out and mingle with other guests while we're getting our photos taken. Additionally, there's another route this can happen because sometimes people will do their ceremony at a church and then they will have the reception at a venue. or a restaurant or something like that. And so if that is the case, then while the bride and the groom are taking their photos at the wedding party, then everybody's going to leave the, where the ceremony was held, and they will drive to where the reception is being held. So that is a possibility for other types of weddings. For us, everything is all happening in one place. We made it super easy like that for all of our guests. So once cocktail hour is finishing up. Now, cocktail hour won't finish up until right about the time that we are finishing with our photos. So at that point, we're going to have specifically a day of coordinator who's going to be ushering people place to place. Now, that doesn't always happen in all weddings, but for ours specifically, we'll have one. And she's going to usher everybody up into the area where the reception will be held, the reception hall. So at that point, everyone's going to go and take their seats. Now, we're going to have assigned seating. There will be a seating chart. You will be required to sit where you have been placed on the seating chart. That is extremely common for American weddings, that people have a seating chart and kind of group people where they want them. Now, that's not always the case. It kind of depends, wedding to wedding. Sometimes it's just free for all, sit wherever you want. But we are required to have a seating chart at our place, and so we will be having a seating chart. Everyone's going to sit down, and nobody's going to eat just yet because the bride and the groom is not there. So before anything else can begin, the DJ or prospective announcer, depending on the wedding, is going to announce the couple as, here is, for the first time ever, Mr. and Mrs. Takor. Yay! Everybody's freaking out. Everybody's clapping. They're excited. And we walk in together holding hands for the first time as Mr. and Mrs. Takor. So for us specifically, as soon as we walk in and make our grand entrance, we are immediately going to go to the dance floor and do our first dance. So let me explain the importance of the first dance, and how we're doing it is a little bit non-traditional. So I'll explain both ways. So the first dance is the bride and the groom dancing together on the dance floor for the first time as a married couple. This is just a very symbolic, traditional part of American weddings. A lot of times, the bride and the groom will have a choreographed dance, and if you know Moni at all, you know that we will be having a choreographed dance. And so other times, it's just, it's whatever they want to do. So it's not choreographed, it's just slow dancing, that kind of thing. But during the first dance, it is very important to notate that nobody else can join the bride and groom during their first dance. So this point, if you have children who might want to run up and dance, please hold them back. This is for our wedding. This is for anybody's American wedding. It is just important to give the bride and groom this time to have their solo dance together. Whether they are choreographed or just free-flowing it, let them do their thing. That's just a part of this ceremony and this tradition of getting married. So how it is also done is, now this is a very new age modern thing of entering and immediately doing the first dance. That has become very, very common throughout American weddings. Traditionally, what it was always done is that would happen later on after dinner. There would be an announcement, that would happen, there would be some other dances, and then it would be open dance floor. So it could go either way. You might see this immediately after the bride and groom enter. You might see it later on after dinner. It's hit or miss, but for our wedding specifically, you'll see it as soon as we enter the room. So at that point, food will be served. And when food is served, it's always typically the bride and the groom who are served first. Now, we're having a buffet style, and so he and I will go up and we'll get our food first, followed by our bridal parties, so the groomsmen and my bride tribe, and then the close family of us, and then from there, the rest of the guests will be, ushered up to the buffet to get their food. So that is most likely going to be handled by our day of coordinator. I'm sure she's going to go around and, table by table, who can go up and get their food. Other times, if it's not a buffet, then the food will just be served where you're sitting at your seat. So again, it just depends on the wedding, the budget of the bride and the groom, how they're doing things, but we're doing buffet style, so everybody's able to just get up, when they are called. So don't just rush to go get food when it's there, but just kind of wait your turn and just understand that there is a little bit of a process to this. So once our food is served, at some point there will be the cutting of the cake. Now, this is a very, very traditional thing where the bride and the groom, they are with the wedding cake, they cut it together and they feed each other a piece of cake each. Now, if you are from Indian culture, then you are used to doing this on birthdays because you guys serve each other cake on birthdays, which I didn't learn until I first started dating Moni. But in American culture, we only feed cake when we get married. So this is going to be very, very interesting just to kind of like watch it, how it plays out, because I'm now used to feeding Moni cake for birthdays. So it's kind of changed for me on how I view this tradition of weddings. But yeah, so we're going to feed each other cake. And then at that point, everybody else will be served cake as well. Again, it starts with the bride and the groom. So also, and I'm not quite sure if this happens before the cake cutting or after the cake cutting, but there will be speeches that are given. So the speeches are typically given by the bridal party. So the best man, definitely the maid of honor, or in my case, the man of honor, and any other people that are within the bridal party, maybe some family members. Now, please keep in mind that the only speeches to be given at our wedding specifically are going to be pre-notified. So if you haven't been notified to give a speech, then you're off the hook. You don't have to give a speech. Also, if you have not been pre-notified to give a speech, please do not impromptu come up and try to give a speech. I appreciate it. We love it. We would love to hear it from you later, but we kind of want to have an idea of how things are going to run in terms of time. We don't want to go over on time or anything like that, or run out of time. So sometimes people in their weddings, they will just, open floor. Anybody wants to give a speech. But typically the parents of the bride and the groom, the best man, the maid of honor or the man of honor, and sometimes it's close friends as well, like siblings, that kind of thing. That's typically who gives a speech. And the speech is about the bride and the groom. And then the fun part is the open dance floor. And at our wedding, an open bar. You're welcome. So after all that said and done, we've all eaten, our bellies are full, we've had cake, we've listened to speeches, and we're now going to get out there on the dance floor. So from there, we're just going to have straight up open dance floor. We'll have a DJ playing. It'll be fun. This is now going to be a big old party. Now, in other weddings, if they don't do the first dance before they eat, then this is when they would start to do it. They would probably do it right after the speeches. They would do the bride and the groom's dance. Sometimes in weddings, they have really sweet moments where like the groom and the mom of the groom will have a little dance together, and like the bride and her dad will dance together. So sometimes those are, they're incorporated into this. Now, our wedding, I don't think is going to have those. I think we're just going to open it all up. But that might change. So don't be surprised, though, if you see that in additional weddings where they have, the groom's mom and the groom dancing together. These are just sweet little traditions that are just kind of, picked up whether or not people want to engage in those. And so after the open dance floor, there is going to be the send-off. So if you guys are familiar with Indian weddings, the vidai, that's kind of like this. So everybody's going to clear out and everyone's going to go outside. So everyone's going to line up. So typically people line up in like rows, like literally like this, like two parallel rows. And the bride and the groom are going to exit. And at the end of these rows is going to be the vehicle that they are going to drive off to and into the abyss for their honeymoon as a married couple. So during this time, people will sometimes have bubbles that they blow. They'll do sparklers. They'll throw... In the olden days, people threw rice, which that was taken out because it was actually getting stuck in people's ears and getting people's eyes, and that's just dangerous. So nowadays, it's usually sparklers or bubbles. Those are like the big things. And so we're most likely going to do cold sparklers. We're not allowed to do warm sparklers at our venue. But that's usually how that works. And at that point, the wedding is over. It is time to go home and relax or go to the hotel, considering that this is an out of city wedding and that kind of thing. And boom, we're done. So all of that again is going to happen within about a 5 to 6 hour time span. It's really quick, really, really simple compared to other weddings. It's still a lot of fun. So please don't get disappointed, because especially if you have attended Indian weddings, this is nothing like that. But it is still fun. There's still lots of fun to be had, and we are super, super excited about our wedding. So for those of you, again, who are attending our wedding, thank you, first of all, for getting through this entire video and for taking the time to understand a little bit about my culture. I really, really appreciate that, and I appreciate you choosing to show up and support me and Moni as we tie the knot the American way. So, for those of you who are tuning in just to learn a little bit about American culture, let me know in the comments if this was helpful, or if I left something out that maybe you know about that I didn't know about, or if you have anything else that you're curious about. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Drop a comment, and once again, thanks for tuning in.